And the title is Ordering Whole Numbers and Decimals. So yesterday we compared two decimal numbers with each other and we said which one is greater or less or equal. Then today we're actually going to do some ordering of whole numbers and decimals. So we're going to take some numbers that we have to put in order, like 1, 2, and 3, or sometimes 4 different numbers. Just like yesterday's lesson, this is really similar to a lesson that we did last week where we took numbers, whole numbers, and we put them in order, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Same thing. And actually a lot of what we're going to do today is just like what we did yesterday. We're going to use the little decimals. We're going to put in our decimals all in a row, and we're going to write the numbers in around it, and then we're going to annex some zeros in there, and then we're going to start comparing each place together. Okay? So here's our first problem of the day, or essential question, same as it's been, and I just kind of talked about it. We use each of the decimal places to compare. So if you have to compare ones with ones, tenths with tenths, hundredths with hundredths. Here's your problem of the day for your whiteboard, which is already in front of you. What number is 2,003,300 more than 10,110,001? So there's your number. Here's my clue of more than, and this number needs to be written in standard form before I can do any addition. We're adding, right, because we see the words more than. So to find a number that's more than another, you would add it. So take a second on your whiteboard. For the number that I had to write out that was in word form was a little harder to think of. So that number says 2 million. So I know I'm a 2 in my millions place. 3,000. One of the mistakes I saw on some boards is some people putting 300,000. They had the 3 in the wrong place. So 3,000, you need a 3 in the thousands place, and then 300. So a 3 in the hundreds place. So we really only had 3 digits there that were not zeros in that number. Okay, and then we have to add them up. So I have both of these numbers that I'm now going to go through and start adding. And I get 12,113,301. Give me a thumbs up if you got that same answer. Maybe if you didn't get that same answer, you see what you did wrong. Maybe you had a number in the wrong place. Okay. I saw some people just kind of trying to blend those two numbers together and put a 2 here and a 1 here, and they got a really big number that wasn't really the right thing. You have to make sure that when we're adding the same place values together. Now this is the part where I have to see if you can do this really quietly. You already have your whiteboard out. You already have your notes out. We're going to quietly set our whiteboards on the table, and then you're going to look over at your notes so that we can take some notes. But we aren't going to shuffle a bunch of things around. You're not going to put markers away because we're going to be using all of that in just a couple more minutes. Okay? All right, so here's chapter 1, lesson 8. The title was Comparing Order Whole Numbers and Decimals. Can you turn around here? That's what I want to do so you can see really well to the screen. So we're not sharing anymore. We're going to take some notes. As soon as if we have something to share, you can turn around and share with them. I'll be there. Okay, so just like I told you at the beginning of this lesson, what we're doing today is pretty much what we did yesterday. So if you got yesterday, then you're going to be good to go for today because it's pretty much going to be the same thing. It is. Let me tell you the difference. The only difference is that we may have 3 numbers or 4 numbers that we're comparing instead of just 2. That's the only difference. So once I start to show you some examples, you're going to see that it's pretty much the same thing. So here's our first example. 1 and 951 thousandths. That should be my little circle. And 1 and 97 hundredths. And we're going to see which one is bigger. So I'm going to do the same thing I did yesterday. I'm going to put my 2 decimal points like this. one on top of the other, And then I'm going to write my numbers in around my decimal points.
Misty Mateo, can I move to a spot that I can sit like by myself when no one's allowed? Can I move back there?
I want to make sure you can see the screen.
I can see it. I'll be able to see it.
Just wait here for a minute. No one's talking to you. You're okay. Okay, so I'm going to start in the ones place. Compare a 1 with a 1. Then I'm going to compare a 9 with a 9. So far they're equal. Then I'm going to go on to the hundreds place where I compare a 5 with a 7. And so since a 7 is larger, then that makes this number 1 and 97 hundredths a larger number. What is it called when I do this? Tristan. Annexing the 0. So this, which I want you to write in your notes, I think that has, let me make sure I spell that right. I think there's 2 N's. There we go. So when we annex the 0, basically that's what we mean. What we mean is that we add in a 0. So in order to start to compare those numbers, you're going to even out both of those numbers. So one of them went to the thousandths place and the other one only went to the hundredths place. And so we added in an extra 0 in order to make sure we knew which one was bigger. You don't have the right thing here. You need to make sure you take notes the way I'm doing it. You have the wrong answer. Pay attention. Look what I have.
This one's bigger though.
Is a number bigger just because it has more digits?
No.
It's not. We talked about that one yesterday. This number has three digits, a 1, a 9, and a 7. The other number has 4, a 1, a 9, a 5, and a 1. You can't just count the number of digits that are in the number and say because that one has 4, it's bigger. You have to do the comparing, and you have to compare each place value with the same place value in the other number. Okay, you can't just assume that one is bigger for a certain reason. Please scoot to this chair. Too close to her. Scoot to this chair. I want to make sure you're listening because otherwise you're not going to know what to do when we're finished. It's really for your benefit. Sit right here. There you go. Okay, so let's do another example. And we're going to keep using that term annex the 0. Then I'm going to have you write a trick in here that you're going to need. Isn't this very similar to what we did yesterday?
Yeah.
Do you see the difference from what we did yesterday? The only difference is that we have numbers in the ones place, and you may have some that have numbers like even in the tens or the hundreds place, but and then there's also numbers after the decimal too. So yesterday we always had zeros in the ones place, and today might be a little different. Oops. Yeah. Gotta write that again. That was the crazy where your lines go all the way across your screen. So when I start to compare, I have 1s here in the ones place. I have 7s and a 2. So that means that 1 and 7/10 is going to be greater than 1 and 2/10 because a 7 in the 10th place is greater than a 2 in the 10th place. On this one, we didn't have to line up any decimals. I mean, we didn't have to annex any zeros. We did have to line up the decimals. That's what we're going to write next. See how I'm reading one thing and saying something? Okay. This is what I want you to have in your notes, because this is for our next one. Make sure you write that and underline it, because it's super, super, super important information. You must line up the decimals when you're comparing 2 or more decimals. Yes? I know, but there is some comparing in there too. What's our notes for today? You're going to have to do both. Some of them have looking at just 2. Yeah, sometimes it's looking at just 2. We're going to do some that have 3 too. Okay, so lining up the decimals is really important. Here's our next. This is why I said that lining up the decimals was important. If we have an example like this. So the first number is 2, and the second number is 1 and 71 hundredths. So the 2, we kind of talked about when we did our morning meeting this morning, and we did some math questions. If there is no decimal point in a number, it goes at the end of the number because that means 2 wholes, 2 in the ones place. So your decimal point would go right here. So when you go to line them up, you need to know where that decimal point goes. So something else I want you to write in your notes is, if there is no decimal point, put 1 at the end. Now this only works if there is not already a decimal point. Every number can only have 1 decimal point in it. So 1 and 71/100ths already has it. The 2 did not. So here's how, by not putting your decimal in the right place, you could accidentally get the wrong answer here. If you put 1 and 71/100ths and then you put the 2 all the way over to the right underneath the last 1 there that's in the hundreds place, then you would have the wrong answer. So you have to make sure that if there is no decimal, that you put it in the right, that you put it right after. Now I have a 2 where I'm going to annex a couple of zeros right here. And then I can start comparing. So all I did was fill in the gaps in the empty space. Now I'm going to start comparing here. And because 1 is bigger than 2, or sorry, 2, whoa, because 2 is bigger than 1, then my answer would be that. 2 is bigger. 2 is bigger than 1 and 71/100ths. This is, think of what this means. 2 wholes is like 2 whole dollars. Think of it like that, $2. 1 and 71/100ths is like $1.71. So anytime you have $2, it's going to be more than if you only had $1 and some cents, right? $2 is always going to be more. So think about that when you're comparing. Sometimes you just kind of use your brain to think, if I think of this as sometimes money terms are like a lot easier to understand whenever we're working with decimals. Okay, let me do another example. I want you to think about which one of those is larger. Put that in your notes. So if I'm ordering these numbers or seeing which one is bigger, comparing them, I put my decimal points there, and I remember what I wrote, that if there is no decimal, it goes at the end of the number. So it's going to go after the 2 in the 732. It's going to go right there. So when I write it in, I would write it in like this. Then I'm going to write the other numbers, 73 and 2/10. So just because the digits are the same does not mean that they're equal to each other. So the 732 did not have a decimal point, and I had to add it there to the end of the number.
So,
And the other one is really 73 and 2/10. And I'm going to annex a 0 right here at the very end. That way they're 2 even when I go to, and you can annex a 0 here too.
oh yeah.
That way when you go to compare, you have something to compare it with, not just a blank space. So automatically, just by looking at the hundreds place there, I can tell that 7 is bigger than 0. So 732 is bigger than 73 and 2/10.
So the first one,
Is the bigger one. 732 is bigger. Because $732 is more than $73.
yeah.
So something else, one more little hint before we do a one that we're going to put in order here. Any number that has a number in the ones place is going to automatically be bigger than one that doesn't. So for instance, if you have, you don't have to write this one, just look. If you have 2 and 7/10 and you have 9 90/100ths, you know that this one is automatically going to be larger because it has a number in the ones place and this one has a 0. Okay? So anytime you see a number in the ones place and the one that you're comparing doesn't have anything in the ones place, it's all automatically going to be bigger. You don't even really have to compare the rest because having whole dollars is better than having cents. Right? Angelina. Okay, let me come by and look at, I'll come by and look at which one you meant in just a minute.
She means 2 and 1, 2 compared to 1 1 and 71/100.
When we compared 2 with 1 and 71/100.
Because it was because
Let's do one where you have to order. So I'm going to have 3 numbers. So I'm going to put 3 decimal points like this. You should do that too. The first one is 9 and 275 thousandths. The next one is 8 and 950 thousandths. And the last one is 9 and 375 thousandths. And if I ask you to put these from least to greatest, then you'll have to tell me which one is smallest. That would be number 1. And then number 3 would be the largest. So this is pretty much what we did last week, but except for we used whole numbers and not decimal numbers. But it's really the same thing. Once you get the decimals lined up, which is really important because we put that in our notes and we underlined it, lining up the decimals is really important because that way you are comparing the same place values with each other. So I'm going to compare all the ones places first. And because this one's an 8, I know it's going to be smallest because it starts with an 8 and the other 2 start with a 9. So now I'm going to start comparing the other numbers that started with 9 to see which one of those is smaller. So I have a 2 on here and a 3 in this 10th place. So the 2 is going to be smaller, right? Because 2 is smaller than 3, which makes this number here smaller than that one. So 8 and 950 thousandths, or you could say 8 and 95 hundredths because you don't really need that last 0, is smallest. 9 and 275 thousandths is second, and then 9 and 375 thousandths is third. Angelina.
Because like there's a 2 and a 3 on both numbers, and then the one with the 2 is the number 2, and then the one with the 6 is
True, it's not always going to be like that, but I'm glad you noticed that, but it's not always going to be like that. So in your book, the way they're going to show it to you for your assignment is they're going to have, they'll say, some of them, I just saw one that says like kilometers ran, and then they have 3 numbers. So the 3 numbers you need to put in order. So you probably are going to need a piece of scratch paper today. You will need a piece of scratch paper today where you are able to put the 3 decimal points, line them up, and then tell me which order they go in. So then on your paper, you'd write the correct order. Make sure you double check if it's least to greatest or greatest to least, because that will make a difference. Okay, look over at your assignment page. We're going to look at example number 1. It says the table shows the cost to build 3 National Football League stadiums. Order the costs from greatest to least. So here's the part that I was talking about. It is important that you note if it's greatest to least or if it's least to greatest. Because if you do it the opposite way, you're going to have your numbers backwards, right? So make sure you're looking the right way. So if you're comparing these 3 numbers, you would line them up using the decimal points. Then compare the digits in the greatest place, which this time is the hundreds place. And so since 4 is larger than 3, that makes this one the largest number. Yeah. Okay. So you might need to switch out for something else if it's...
not that big.
Okay, you can show me after. Then we're going to go to the next place. We're going to compare the digits in the next greatest place. Go ahead and sharpen. The next greatest place is the tens place. So we're comparing a 6 and a 5. So because 6 is greater than 5, it does. I don't know why though. Because we have to do them one at a time. So because, let's just stop there. Because 6 is greater than 5, we ought to, and because 5 is less than or is greater than the other number, then we know that the number that has the 5 is going to be the smallest number. So 364 and 2/10 is going to be the second largest, and then 350 is the smallest. So put them in that order. Let me see what your paper looks like. Just don't put anything in that other blank space. Here's another way. Here's a way number 2. So this was just like the ones that we did when we did this yesterday. They gave you some that had a number line. So all you have to do is put the numbers in on the number line. So we had 350 was one of them. One of the other numbers is 364 and 2/10, which would be somewhere around there. Because 364 is a little bigger than 350, but the next number up is 375. So 364 is less than 375, so it's going to go before it. And then the last number is 430, which would go somewhere around there. So if you were using a number line, sometimes a number line's not the best way to do it because you don't always have access to this great number line to look at. And you don't always want to make a number line every time you do this. Every time you do a problem, you don't want to create a number line. So if they offer you one like they have here, you can use it and it's a good way to help you solve, but it's not probably a very practical way to do it all the time, unless you have access to a number line. So here's the costs from greatest to least. So the biggest would be 430. And you can put the decimal 0 if you want to. And the next one would be 364 and 2/10. And then the last one is 350 and 0/10. So get those filled in. Then we're going to go to example number 2 before you're able to get started today. One more example. This one says that 4 trees in a forest had heights of 22 and 65/100, 23 and 8/10, 22 and 23 and 25/100. Order the heights from least to greatest. So this time we're doing the opposite way, least to greatest. That's what I'm talking about, is that sometimes they can trick you into by changing up what they're asking you to do each time, so you really have to pay close attention. Did you notice that this one here was just 22, and look how they made it? They put 22 with a decimal at the end, and then they annexed a couple of zeros to make it even with all the other numbers. So the smallest of all those numbers, when we go down here comparing, we have all these 2's in the 10's place. Then we have a 2, 3, a 2, 3. So we're going to compare the 2 that have the 22 to see which one of those are smaller. So that one has a 0 and this one has a 6. So the one with the 0 is going to be smaller. So the least number is 22. And we can put that down here. The second one would be the other number that started with 22. Then next in line, we're going to look at these 23 numbers. We have an 8 and a 2 for the 10th place. So the one with a 2 in the 10th place will be the next smallest number. So that would make this one number 3, which leaves that one as number 4. So number 3 would be 23 and 25/100, and then number 4 is 23 and 80/100. Or you could leave that last 0 off and make it 23 and 8/10, and that would still be a correct answer. So what I wanted you to see on this one, we need to write what the greatest number is. It's 23 and 80/100 to fill in that line. So what I wanted you to see with this one, what made this example different than the other one, was we were comparing 4 numbers on this one. We were comparing least to greatest, but the biggest difference was that this one had a whole number, just 22. So you have to know what to do when you have just a whole number there. To make sure that you put the decimal at the end and then annex any zeros that you need to take up the space. It's really better if you have all those zeros in there so that you're comparing digits with digits. Okay? Here's your guided practice page. Looks like this. So as soon as you do these 4 questions, you can work together or you can work separately, and then you can just check your answers. But I do want you to check your answers, because that way if you get all 4 of these right, then you know that you're on the right track and you know what to do, and then you can probably do the rest by yourself and you don't have to have any help. Okay? Anybody have any questions? Okay, as you're working, if you need help, raise your hand and I will come by and help you. Read the directions really, really carefully. You may even want to use your pencil to underline whether they want you to do least to greatest or greatest to least each time, because they do change it up on you quite a bit on this assignment. Okay? All right, so once you do the guided practice, you're ready to get started on independent.